Welcome to One on One, the Daily Items weekly digital program featuring Susquehanna Valley newsmakers interviewed by Daily Item reporters. Today's guest is community activist Dwayne Heisler, interviewed by Rick Dandes.
Up your new car game in March with a new Kia for just $99 a month from Sunbury Motors Kia. Lease a 2019 Kia Forte LX for just $99 a month for only 24 months. Drive away in a 2019 Kia Soul for only $149 a month. With deals like this, you'll have to hurry in to get in under the buzzer.
Welcome to One on One. I'm Rick Dandes, and I'm here today with Dwayne Heisler, who is a community activist.
Yes.
Welcome, Dwayne.
Thank you very much.
Dwayne has an interesting history, so I think before we get into some topics about healthcare and other issues important to Pennsylvanians, I think talking a little bit about who you are, how you got to the point where you had that interest.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. It hasn't been until recently that I started talking about kind of my childhood, and because we met at the ACLU Awards here locally, I kind of put that into my presentation, that it kind of came up. And so I came from a very poor family. In fact, I didn't even know who my dad was.
Where were you from? New York City?
Yeah, so I was born in Brooklyn, but then my family moved around a lot. They moved to different places in the Allentown, Whitehall, that area, and then they moved back to Brooklyn. So some of my earliest memories are from Brooklyn, North 7th Street, Wythe Avenue, and Kent Avenue.
Flatbush.
There you go. Okay. So I was pretty close to Greenpoint, at Williamsburg Bridge, Greenpoint, that area. And at that time, it was a small Polish neighborhood when we had gone back there. So in elementary school, that's where I was. And I remember what it was like to live in poverty. I mean, I know what it's like to be the trained kid when the bill collector comes to the door or the phone rings. I know what it's like not to have a vehicle, or when you did have one, it was broken down more than it was not. So having to use public transportation. I remember paint peeling. I'm sure it was lead paint all over the apartment, the third floor apartment. I remember not being able to sleep because of adults arguing in the room next door, turning on the light in the morning and watching the roaches just run across the floor and across the kitchen table and up the walls. Yeah. And the abuse, that often comes with poverty. Physical, being thrown like a bowling ball through several rooms as a kid, having social workers come by the house, and emotional, distress that often comes and around all those things with poverty. So I was happy a few years ago when I got to work with the United Way, and I worked on a program with them called Bridges Out of Poverty, and was able to put on some presentations. So it's hard to believe like what I do now and who I am now, coming from that background.
And you have been a businessman and...
Yeah, I mean, I owned a business for over 30 years. I guess 30 years I owned a business, my own business. I'm very active politically. I've traveled quite extensively, and certainly not... I managed to escape. I managed to escape that, and that was not an easy thing to do.
Well, I think the takeaway is that you weren't born with a silver spoon in your mouth.
So here's a little funny story about that, a silver spoon. No, I didn't have a silver spoon, but there was actually a silver spoon in my family, and this silver spoon was passed along to the first Heisler in every generation. Well, when my cousin got it, he questioned it and said, how come you didn't get it? Because, how come Dwayne didn't get it? Because he's the oldest child. And they said, well, because Dwayne's not really a Heisler. He was adopted. And it was at that point that they contacted my family and said, hey, you better let him know because it's out now. And so I didn't find out until I was a senior in high school that my father wasn't my father.
Oh, Lord.
So, and that was because of a silver spoon, which the irony of that is just amazing, I think. But,
all right. So maybe all of that somehow contributed to your to now you're working with healthcare and hospital staffing, and talk a little about that.
So I'm an activist, as you said.
Yeah.
I believe that people should have a voice and they should stand up. And as we see now, and as we've seen in the recent past, healthcare is such an important issue. Well, right now I'm working with SEIU Healthcare PA, and it's a union, local union.
Is that a
and
union?
so yeah, it's a union. SEIU is the Service Employees International Union. It's one of the largest unions in the world, and I work particularly in the Northeast PA, working with all of our members, and we have thousands of members that belong to unions. SEIU service employees, so it could be nurses, it could be janitors, it could be people that work in food service or technicians and things like that. And so healthcare is something important. And as a kid, I mean, I know what that's like not having good healthcare in a poor family. I remember when I lived in Jim Thorpe in Carbon County, and we were on public assistance every week. We went to the dentist, and every week I had a new filling that needed to be filled. And then when I went to college, one of the first things I did was I wanted to go back to a dentist, and I managed to save money to visit the dentist, and took x-rays of my mouth, and he found out that all of those cavities were not real cavities. They were just doing that so they could bill and get the money. And so I had a mouth that was filled with, fillings. And so one of the things I did was I did it in 4 different shots. I saved up enough money to get white fillings in my teeth so that I didn't have all that dark, gritty, metal in my mouth.
Wow. So tell me about staffing. What's the situation with staffing?
So staffing is a nightmare, and you don't have to ask me. I'm not anyone special. Staffing is a challenge because if you talk to any relative or friend that is at a hospital or a nurse or a nursing home, ask them how their shift was and ask them how well staffed it was. We have a real staffing crisis in this state, and it really plays out incredibly, even worse in nursing homes. For example, in nursing homes, the current standard that the state allows is 2.7 hours. So that means if you're in a nursing home, if you have a loved one in a nursing home, that nursing home is only required to provide care for 2.7 hours, to have someone visit them for that amount of time. I know for my dad, I don't feel comfortable with him being in a facility for 24 hours and that the facility is only required to have a nurse or someone take care of him for 2.7 hours.
I didn't know that.
No, there's a bill right now circulating in Harrisburg to change that to 4.1 hours. This is a no-brainer. I think it is for everyone out there that we need to have good staffing, and obviously the consequences of not having good staffing, can go anywhere from, injuries to death. So this is an important issue.
And you said you've been in a hospital. You told me a little while ago that you were in a hospital. Tell me about that experience.
Yeah, so I was in a head-on car accident about 2 weeks ago, and I was rushed to the Hershey Medical Center, which is the premier trauma center in the central part of the state. Yeah. And there were multiple hallways. First of all, the staff was amazing. I've never been so thoroughly physically processed. I'm on blood thinners, so they were really concerned about internal injuries, and they did an incredible job.
So they triaged you?
Yes, completely, totally X-ray scans, just everything. I was conscious through all of it. I actually have a fractured knee, a fractured hand, and a fractured rib, but the doctors are very pleased with my progress. The point is that the staff was amazing, but the facility was lacking. And I didn't end up leaving there, got there just after 1 o'clock, didn't end up leaving until 11 o'clock in the evening. And part of that is a staffing issue. The other part are the physical limits of that hospital. The walls, Rick, were lined up, 2 separate hallways where two stretchers could pass one by one like this.
Oh,
and that's and on one side of each of these walls, going the entire length of the hallway, were stretchers and wheelchairs. There were no rooms. There were no rooms available. And when I asked what is going on with this, they said, well, it's a Monday. So there wasn't some kind of emergency or anything. This is typical. And how I knew they were telling me the truth was at about, for every stretcher length and maybe a chair, they had a small little hook that came out with curtains that came out about 3 feet to offer some kind of privacy for the patients who were in the hall because there aren't any rooms available for them.
Well, this is certainly an issue we have to keep in touch with, and it'll be interesting to see how this bill progresses. Dwayne, we'll be right back in a minute.
Okay, thank you.
Up your new car game in March with a new Kia for just $99 a month from Sunbury Motors Kia.
Wanna see you in a Kia. Sunbury Motors Kia.
You heard right. Lease a 2019 Kia Forte LX for just $99 a month for only 24 months. Drive away in a 2019 Kia Soul for only $149 a month. With deals like this, you'll have to hurry in to get in under the buzzer.
Welcome back to One on One. We're speaking today with Dwayne Heisler, a community activist. So we've been talking about healthcare, another big issue everyone's worried about, or concerned about wages.
Oh yes, and once again, I don't know what it is about our state. I love Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania has been good to me, but we are always, it seems, at the bottom of the barrel with everything. We are the only state that has not raised their minimum wage. Every other state around us, all of our bordering states, all have a higher minimum wage than the $7.25 an hour, which everyone knows. Everyone should know that that is not a sustainable income at full time.
Right.
And so I brought some numbers actually to be prepared for this for like Northumberland County and
Sure.
what that would look like.
Sure.
Because there's a bill that's circulating right now in the state legislature. It's the Fight for 15 is kind of the coin, but they're looking just to raise it to $12 an hour and then to gradually get
Sure.
up there at 50 cents per year.
So it's not to shock small businessmen or anything like that.
Yeah, or to shock anyone. It's kind of a gradual move with this. And let me tell you also that in almost every measurable way, all those states that are around us are doing better economically than we are, including their small businesses. So just an example of this. Sometimes people talk about, well, minimum wage jobs are just for kids, right? That's the starting positions and jobs like that. Well, here's what's really interesting about that. 55.6% in Northumberland County who are making minimum wage are over the age of 40. 55.6% of people receiving the minimum wage over 40 are 40 years or older. Between 29 and 20 and 39, it's 41%. Only 3.1% are under 20. So this is affecting adults.
I was going to say, what does that say to you that people can't?
Well, it says that basically the argument that this is only affecting young people is just not really true. When only 3% of them, 3.1%, are under the age of 20. It's not the young people that have these minimum wage jobs. It's people over 40, and it's over half of them. And so there's no way that you can sustain yourself. In fact, in Columbia County, not Columbia County, in Northumberland. I'm from Columbia, but I ran the numbers on Northumberland, which is why I'm looking for it. The average housing cost per month is $478. Average food bill about $265, and then there's transportation, healthcare. We talked about healthcare, about $500, $527. Transportation, $800 and some, because of paying for your car and things like that. When you add that all up, your total monthly expenses are about $2,800, right? $2,884. If you look at a full-time income at $7.25 an hour, that's $1,200.
Doesn't compute.
No, it doesn't compute. And this is why people have 2 jobs and 3 jobs and are forced to stay at home or are forced to have multiple roommates or whatever that might be in order just to survive. It just doesn't make any sense.
That answers the question of perhaps why you have an older demographic doing a lot of these jobs, because it's the second or third job.
Oh, right, absolutely. And people they go from one job to the next, and I'm lucky. I have a good paying union job, and union membership, of course, has drastically declined. SEIU, the union I belong to, has been rising, but most unions have been declining over the past few decades. And along with that goes the power to bargain for good wages and safe working conditions, like in healthcare, making sure there's good staffing. I mean, no one joins a union to make less money. No one joins a union to be less safe. Mm-hmm. And when those protections are gone, you see what happens to jobs. And so you end up with economics locally that cannot sustain themselves. I mean, the governor was just here to talk about urban blight. or rural blight, actually, was visiting Shamokin. And this is what, anyone that is in a plane and flies over rural Pennsylvania can see city after city that's declining. Just declining. We are like a giant exporter. We export our labor. They can work cheaper in other states. We all know when you have kids, we are almost faced with the inevitability that if they're going to succeed in life, they need to leave.
Yeah.
Why should we? Yeah. Why should we be that way, right? And because there aren't these jobs, and especially hard in this area in rural Pennsylvania.
Well, these are issues for us to contemplate, and you're one of the people out there working to make things better. So thank you very much for being here. Our thanks to you, Dwayne Heisler, and to all of you for watching.
Thanks for watching One on One. Be sure to tune in next week for another edition.